Okay. So shall we begin, Geeta?
Yeah, we should.
Okay. Welcome to one more edition of Talking Films Online. Today we are discussing the Telugu film Care of Kancharapalem. The film was suggested to us by Dr. Vamshi Vemireddy, who teaches at the Center for Comparative Literature, University of Hyderabad. He works in the area of film, media, and cultural studies. Dr. Vamshi's work has appeared in various journals such as Journal of Creative Communication, Asian Cinema, Deep Focus, etc. His present research examines the area of emerging digital cultures that problematize the proliferating social media platforms with an explicit focus on its infrastructure and technology capabilities. Welcome, Vamshi. Thanks for suggesting the film. I think some of us had watched the film, and we didn't mind watching it again for this discussion. Welcome, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Nikhila. First of all, for inviting me to be part of Talking Films, and I really enjoyed the last session. And when I was asked to choose a movie, there are many films that thought I should choose and talk about, and especially after SV's talk, I thought I should not really get into the realm of mass politics and mediatized politics or something related with star and cinema, uh, uh, for which Telugu cinema is known for. So I thought I would touch upon something that that has created few ripples in Telugu film industry almost 2 years back. The movie called Care of Kancharapalem. So I really like the movie. I also, it's kind of it's so refreshing. Everybody must have watched. I'm not going to kind of go on praising the movie or describing how is the movie in what way, but there are a couple of reasons why I have chosen this movie to talk about. Primarily two reasons. So I would probably kind of situate the film in larger scheme of things that happen in Telugu film industry. So these two reasons would be kind of explaining what is so right with Care of Kancharapalem and what is so wrong with Care of Kancharapalem. The first and foremost reason is it's absolutely wonderful, beautiful love story to start with. And why do I say that beautiful love story? Because everybody is talking about love story. I mean, everybody said that it's a love story. So, and also it is a love story. I'm not here to kind of pull anybody's leg. It is a love story. It's a beautiful love story. It's a very simple love story. It is very unlike Telugu cinema. Telugu cinema is full of full of big budget movies, and very small stories, but having a very big star cast, huge list of character artists, and crazy locations, and plot of very posh songs and very quality audio, video, everything, editing. They don't just compromise on anything. So in that a very glossy Telugu cinema world, suddenly you are kind of pushed towards Care of Kancharapalem. So certainly it's refreshing movie. It is a very small budget movie, and look at a real location. It's really shot at Kancharapalem near Visakhapatnam. It looks so real. It's I mean, very often we tend to bring this Bollywood versus South Indian film industries. We claim that the three or four very big industries we tend to ignore and all. And particularly Telugu and Tamil cinema, they're always brought together to compare and to converge, to bring some kind of convergence and all. But when we especially talk about cinema like Kancharapalem, it is so common to kind of see these kind of movies in Tamil cinema, and it's so uncommon in Telugu cinema. So in a sense, Tamil cinema and Telugu cinema actually not very similar in some sense, just because because star system and mass politics and all. But the Tamil cinema industry much better in terms of uh, the variety of stories that it presents, and the kind of challenging themes that it deals with. Telugu cinema is quite in a sense very static and stuck with kind of maybe 80s and 90s, at least 80s and 90s had little revolutionary concepts, in terms of cinema themes and all. So in that context, certainly it's a very refreshing cinema. It's a story about very small people, not so big people. The story does not talk about becoming chief minister, or talking about a big change that that a big star studded movies talk about. Especially the movie has come in a time when the big stars are talking about big ideas like changing, adopting a village and changing the state or the country, and becoming chief minister. And I mean, I'm talking about Srimantudu and other movies that big hits during that time, and changing the society overnight and talking about big policy changes and all. So and whatnot. I mean, the big Bahubali is there, as a big bonanza for Telugu industry to boast about forever. So in this, kind of brief background, it's absolutely refreshing and heartening to see a story of small people, uh, and so real, and the sides of contestation, the Telugu cinema versus this kind of cinema. Some people are calling it, a new wave. Very difficult for me to confirm it as new wave cinema, but nonetheless, no point. I mean, we should be liberal to kind of appreciate if it is new wave, and hopefully it will not stop here. And also another significant theme that was running uh, during, I mean, this contemporary Telugu cinema is city versus village. There are few films, films like Shatamanam Bhavati, which also won a national award for its integration and family category, I guess. And that basically propagates and profoundly promotes the idea of village. How relationships in the village are so pure, and so neat and so clean and so holy and pure, in a sense. And the characters, most of the characters come from Australia, US, and abroad, England, and all, and they come to a village to discover themselves, by one character who brings them, protagonist brings them and all. So if we have such kind of movies, and there are a couple of movies that uh, glorifies the village, back to village type, and also Srimantudu, for that matter, Srimantudu and all, coming back to village and taking care of our own village and changing it for good and all. And there are other movies, that actually demonize the village life and kind of glorify the Western life or modern life of cities and all. Movie like Mirchi, and many movies that have some kind of action written story where the village is seen as a very pre-modern, medieval mindset, and somebody, the agency would come from the city. And like even in Srimantudu and other movies, if you are like a little aware of Telugu cinema and its trends recently, so the protagonist would come from city and try to change the villagers and try to tell them that this is not the way you are supposed to live, and you are supposed to get into the modern life and modernity, humanity, and all. The village is something that I mean, when I say village, it's all about violence and all, not not any real issue that is been talked about. So in this is the another little background that I would like to kind of give you to look at the movie differently. And also it's also refreshing. Another refreshing thing is to look at not just small people on the screen, and small, I mean, the characters, the role they play after a long time in Telugu cinema. Even Telugu cinema it's not that Telugu cinema did not have a character like Raju, attender, or Salima, prostitute, or gaddam, literally translated as beard, wine shop worker who works in wine shop. It's not that we didn't have these characters in Telugu cinema, but they were never focused on this. The cinema was always about the big picture, the big stories. Even if the person comes from a working class, suddenly he becomes so rich, or suddenly he challenges the heroine's father, and either he takes over the entire empire of heroines, or try to teach the lesson to heroine or heroine's father. And somewhere it's a very larger than life kind of character that is always built. So in that way, it's very refreshing to see this movie where the small character, I mean, very simple characters like attender, prostitute, wine shop worker, small time, rowdy, sculptor. So all these characters take the lead role in running the show. So after looking at all these specialities, or what the things that stand out for Kancharapalam, one thing is sure that what is so right about the movie is it really kind of slaps Telugu film industry once again, and brings it down from the kind of what do I say, kind of assumption that Telugu cinema industry has arrived at a international scene with movies like Bahubali, and a lot of other movies. The people also claim that movies like Srimantudu and other movies are also kind of very big movies, and not in terms of box office. Box office things are doing good. I really don't want to get into the box office collection and all, but in terms of the story and the kind of perception about Telugu cinema and the treatment of characters, the characterization, and the kind of themes that the industry deals with. So it's almost like Care of Kancharapalam is part of Telugu film industry, but at the same time it's not really part of Telugu film industry. It actually kind of poses a challenge, alternate challenge, to Telugu film industry. So that's something that one of the reasons why. One of the reasons why I wanted to kind of choose this movie. The second reason is more to do with the movie itself. So the movie is so special. All you must have watched the movie, and I'm not going to summarize the movie anyway. The second reason is the theme that it deals with. It's very, very interesting theme that it deals with. It at the surface level, it is a love story, and it talks about love of different characters, between different characters, basically four couples at different stages of their life. And it's so beautiful, the drama, and the so real, and the dialogues are real, and there are no other typical cinematic stuff that has been involved in, and songs are very and kind of very situation centric, and the things are fine, but little going beyond the surface, you tend to see a couple of things that are visible. In fact, I'm not going to decode anything like that. One thing is the the visibility of caste. The other is visibility of religion, and the third one is the kind of social status and poverty, and all this stuff that's anyway visible. The first two themes are very interesting for industry like Telugu. Telugu industry is known for the themes that I mean, it is known for various themes, especially right from the beginning. And but one theme that is always, which is always very inconvenient, very troublesome, very what do I say? Very difficult for Telugu cinema industry to deal with is the idea of caste. If you and it's not that they never dealt it. They have done it. Right from the beginning. One of the most the classic film called Malapilla. So that itself, with along with Raita Bidda, one of the most progressive at that time. That itself talks about Dalit life, and the heroine is a Malapilla there. And she is a Dalit girl, and of course there are a lot of critics during 1938 or 36, I think it's released. Critic like I don't remember. Kutumbarao. Critic like Kutumbarao actually criticized that I mean the Dalit life that is shown in Balapilla is like so glorified and so far from the reality that you will be kind of doubting that that when did the Dalits develop so much in terms of physical wealth and social status and other stuff. The way the heroine sings a lot of slokas and all. So he argues that basically it's far from reality. So right from the beginning of talkies, Telugu industry had a huge problem with dealing with the caste. Probably they didn't know how to deal with it, and also the structure of Telugu film industry is very difficult, for it for the industry to talk about the caste. Unlike Tamil cinema, again, that's why I kind of gave a very big statement kind of stuff that Telugu cinema and Tamil cinema just though they look very similar, but they are very different. You can certainly expect Madurai films, so mainstream, they're very popular and they're known for it, and the kind of themes that Tamil cinema takes up, it's very difficult for Telugu cinema to even imagine to start with. So here and there for a decade, you may get some social realistic and hard hitting films, but right from the beginning, Telugu cinema industry didn't know how to deal with the caste issue, caste theme, or to talk about anything about caste. They were always like trembling always right from the beginning. People, legends like Vishwanath tried it with the movie called Saptapadi, which was kind of known, not very big blockbuster or such. And the another movie which is also known for awards and all, again by Vishwanath, it's called Rudravina, which is by Chiranjeevi. And Chiranjeevi was kind of was a megastar. I mean, it was, I think by the time he was a supreme hero and he was about to become megastar, and it was a huge issue for him to take up such theme, and it was a big flop. Movie was so beautiful, it's also again movie about the Brahmin boy and the Dalit girl, and even like unlike Saptapadi Dalit boy and Brahmin girl. uh, I don't know. Again, you can ask me always in the discussion why only Brahmin and Dalit. What is so when you have intermediate castes are so strong and rule the industry? Why does the high Brahmin figure, at least in Telugu cinema case, the Brahmin figure is a so sorry figure in a sense, and they are so limited to little bit lyricists and all, dance masters and all. So yeah, that's a different issue altogether. Yeah, so movies like Saptapadi, Rudraveena, Jayam Manidera, and Aunanna Kadana recently. There's so many movies, at least 10 to 15 minute films you can easily remember that are that try to touch upon the issue of caste in some way or the other, either through intercaste marriages, or questioning the oppression, or identifying the oppression, or even indirectly talking about the oppression that involves caste in some way or the other. uh, the interesting result about all these attempts are that none of the films really did well at the box office. So probably that also kind of you can give exemption to the Telugu film industry, that yeah, since it didn't work traditionally and historically, maybe people didn't try. But one thing, all of you know that the way Telugu film industry works, unlike other film industries, any industry that you take in India uh, are much better compared to Telugu film industry. The way it is located, when I say located, not physical located, the people who the way it is controlled by certain sections of the society and certain regions. So certain communities or castes and certain regions. So it's very limited a kind of company that has a huge impact on both Telugu states, not just both Karnataka and other the Telugu diaspora, wherever it is. It is basically controlled by people from Krishna, Godavari, and Guntur. There's three regions and a couple of castes, especially intermediate castes like Kapo, Kamma, and Reddy, some few. So these are the castes that actually control in the production, in the casting, in everywhere, in all aspects. You don't. I mean, it's very closely knit industry, and probably now little opening up, after Telangana movement, you get to know some Telangana actors coming up, and also you see very often out of, I don't know what is the reason, but you also see Telangana dialect appearing in Telugu cinema. But nonetheless, anyway, first till 80s and 90s, the location was never a problem. Location was never a problem, and the markers were not very clear. The characters were not named after their caste and all, and the geographical locations were also like very typical generic names like Ramapuram, Venkatapuram, Lakshmipuram, this kind of stuff. You don't even know whether it is located in Telangana, Rayalaseema, or Uttar North Coastal Andhra. But after 90s, it started talking about naming the characters. It will have a little class markers, especially caste markers and region markers. Started asserting, the Telugu cinema industry started asserting itself and talking about its own communities and its own regions. So that's also another reason why it didn't know how to handle the inconvenient truth like caste, because it has experienced two massacres, huge massacres like Karam Chedu, and the other one is Chunduru. So and especially they both happen to be in the kind of heart of this region that is controlled by kind of control the Telugu film industry. So but most of the movies that have touch upon this Dalit themes also have the agency issue. It's always the upper caste that comes from the outside and try to reform and reform his own community, and also try to change the other people. So it's a very and also interreligious theme that Kancharapalem also brings to the fourth. And hardly we have any interfaith such a popular movies. We have a couple of like Maracharitra and Mauna Ragam, that are essentially Tamil movies that dubbed into Telugu. So this idea of the Christian and that is not there. The Christian and Hindu marriages is never thought of, which should be, at least because of the sheer the social reality and social composition of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. One should, the cinema industry should have addressed that issue, but never care to would never care to talk about caste. So they would certainly would not expect them to talk about interreligious conversations or marriages or love stories. Hardly you see. See, essentially the Telugu cinema industry uh, uh, what kind of was limited to the class rift. Conveniently they used the class garb and ran for almost 70 years. uh, and it never had a problem, because the cast, you class is like both the hero and heroine. You switch the roles here and there, play around, whatever you do, the both come from the same community. So it doesn't matter what class you come from, because if you are lower class or working class or a poor, you eventually become rich, or eventually bring the heroine down, at least take the heroine or the rich girl to your home. So in that way, people are kind of the typical pattern was established. And I'm happy that the Kancharapalam. This is the second reason why I'm talking about. Second reason is that the other movie that uh, though at the surface level you tend to see a love story, but it also talks about the caste problem. It's a huge caste problem. It is about the caste, though it does not explicitly talk about. That's also another problem that I would like to highlight. So the theme is the most problematic concept for Telugu film industry historically, and unlike Tamil cinema, I just mentioned. Uh, yes, so it is the question that I would like to kind of address while looking at Kancharapalem. It is certainly heartening to see how Kancharapalem talks about uh, a small place and small characters, and it celebrates their life essentially. And it's also interesting and to see after a long time, you try to see it. A movie starts a conversation about the oppressed people, and not just oppressed in a more academic sense, but the people that who are never there, who never got a chance to kind of exhibit themselves on silver screen. The kind of characters that are seen were never got an opportunity to be represented, to be kind of to be told a story about themselves. What what kind of life. It's a simple, very beautiful story that is being told. But the problem is, it is being told in the name of love story. That's one thing that is absolutely I'm happy about, but at the same time it's kind of problematic because it continues the legacy. It's about getting confused and having a problem in addressing the issue, in a sense, issue through love. So though the movie uh, in a couple of instances talks about why certain relationship does not work because of because we come from different religions. Uh, in terms of in the case of Joseph and uh, Raju, Joseph and Raju. So the girl, since she comes from Brahmin family and her father does not agree for the marriage, it's very interesting to note that the girl says explicitly that the only hurdle for our marriage to happen is our religion, which is absolutely, I think, escape route that is being laid out by the film. It does not talk about caste. See, essentially, one would probably understand the main reason for his father to not to accept the marriage proposal or whatever the relationship is not, may not be solely uh, because he is a Christian. It is the major reason is because he is a Dalit, and the cinema does not want to talk about that fact. Cinema does want to kind of generalize all the religions, that the religion is basically against love, and religion kind of we should discard it. It's a typical Indian secular kind of discourse where religion does not is not good for anything, just there for home, all this stuff. But it 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 is good in a sense, but it continues its legacy problem. It's still confused about to talk about intercaste marriages and interreligious marriages. It's gets confused with intercaste. I mean, with interreligious. Just imagine what would happen to the girl's father if the girl had loved, say, Englishman or American who happens to come to Kancharapalem and happens to meet the girl and you know uh, bring the proposal. We would know. There is some probability that the, the the father would probably agree. Here he would not agree, because not because he's a Christian, because the, it's because he's a Dalit. That is something that the movie conveniently uh, you know uh, uh, kind of, I would not say it, I would not say deliberately ignored, but it has its own issues. That's what I would try to tell you, that Kancharapalem is so refreshing, but at the same time it tries to continue its own legacy. For that matter, if somebody is interested, there is one movie called Palasa, which is also recently released, and it actually talks about the caste resistance and oppression, and it also takes certain inspiration from Kalyan Rao's Untouchable Spring, certain ideas from Kalyan Rao's Untouchable Spring, and talks about resistance and mentions certain gives certain references to Karam Chedu and Chunduru massacres, and talks about Ambedkar as a philosopher. And here I would also like to kind of point out the kind of dilemma that the Telugu cinema industry has. Most of the filmmakers, there's, I mean, somebody has to try, right? There's nobody that actually tried and tested. Like, for example, Tamil cinema, it had gone through several phases, and due to Dravidian ideology and the kind of movement that it had, it's not that Telugu film industry didn't have it. Had, once upon a time, during Tribunemi Ramaswamy Chaudhary, NTR even tried to make certain movies, that are aligned to Dravidian ideology, especially movies like Danavira Shurakarna and all. But later, it just turned out, just a small, it just fizzled out, and it just back to the same few communities and few regions controlling the entire film industry. So that you don't get the new narratives. The directors don't come from different regions, actors don't come from different regions, the stories don't come from different regions, and the culture, the language, the themes would only come from a particular region. So certainly you will get only certain things. uh, this I would like you to kind of draw certain comparisons with contemporary Tamil cinema, uh, where you have Paranjit, aggressively taking up certain agenda. You may agree with him or do not agree with him, or the way he deploys Rajnikant in movies, that's a different thing altogether. But there is a visible presence, and there is a conversation, there is a discussion, there is some certain themes that are so visible on Tamil cinema, whereas Telugu cinema is still grappling uh, uh, for ways in which it would address certain issues about even gender, caste, and all. So Kancharapalem is very good in a sense. It is so different from the Telugu cinema. It gives different challenges. It reminds Telugu cinema that what it is capable of. Uh, but however, it has its own legacy issues. It continues to ignore certain social realities. It would like to. I mean, the director, I certainly like him, and the way they made it, absolutely wonderful. But the movie is a love story. But if you just remove the love story, if there is anything about the movie, it's about cast, right from the first scene to the till last scene. It is about cast. It starts with it, Raju, and ends with Raju, of course. But the Sundaram story, the right from the childhood to the 50-year-old Raju, the story is about everywhere. It is about the cast, and it is in subtle way. It is discussed, and it is carefully crafted. A kind of love story has been kind of quoted nicely, so that you we talk about it and do not talk about it. You don't, and I really liked it that they didn't want to sound preachy. I also watched a couple of interviews of the filmmakers. They never wanted to be preachy. They don't want to kind of sound like giving sermons, about humanity. Of course, the character Raju talks about humanity, and ultimately it is one significant recurring theme that it uh, addresses is that the religious. Uh, uh, it is the movie somewhere says that no, religious religion doesn't matter. We don't need religion. Religion are essentially against love. So that was there, but when it comes to the caste and all, that is something that is ignored. So that's what I wanted to kind of in fact I wanted, after some time I realized that I should have also asked you guys to watch Palasa, so that that's a one movie probably one can talk about talking about the cast explicitly. We have a few movies that are called under the category of red films, but they are essentially class based movies that talk about oppression and and rights and all. And this is second reason why I wanted to talk about this movie. This movie is so special. uh, so it's a couple of questions that would also can be asked after this Kancharapalam. Care of Kancharapalam is released in theaters. It is luckily been brought by one of the kind of who's called as a kind of uh, Anal Guru. Anal Guru, in a sense, we translate it as those four people. So those four people are known as a mafia. I'm adding, but the four people are known for their controlling capabilities of Telugu film industry. Suresh Babu, Dil Raju, Allu Aravind, and the Dasari, I guess, films. So and these one of the four has actually bought this movie. That's very interesting that he bought the movie. In fact, of course, because he bought the movie, it was so visible. It was released in theaters. It got partial success in theater, but it has become a talking point once it is released in Netflix, and the way it has given a fresh perspective, and it has become very important movie. with Netflix and Prime and these OTT platforms taking over this cinema. So the two things that before getting into the discussion, probably I request the people here to think about it, just to ponder, that the first question is that, uh, is this the model to tell a Dalit story? In Telugu cinema, you must. I try to kind of summarize what was happening right from the beginning in Telugu cinema industry. Is the way to tell a story so that I'm not even saying that every time it has to be about violence, it has to be about oppression, it has to be about struggles and all. But you can also tell a love story, but you can get away with it, so that the film industry would not ignore you or boycott the producer or director, or you will not kind of kind of ignored. You will get more and more chances because you don't talk about the issue directly, but you talk about the issue indirectly, and you try to sensitize people through this kind of story, which is wonderful story is all about. So this is the way. This is a new tool to tell a story. That's one question that probably one can ask. Unlike Paranjit, who is very aggressive and very visible uh, campaign that he runs. The other question is that does the OTT give confidence for these kind of movies uh, to get success? As I've already told you, Telugu cinema doesn't have a good history of having box office hits that have themes with Dalit stories, or anything related to Dalit. I have not come across a movie that is hit and it talks about Dalit story. If the hero could be Dalit, I mean, in whatever capacity, and if the hero uh, indirectly you talk about, I mean, the community or anything, but certainly they just take it away and try to give a different color altogether, and it maybe become a big hit. That's a different thing. Telugu industry didn't have that kind of theme, and uh, didn't have a good box office success. So this OTT, this platform, does it give a good opportunity to experiment with themes that are alien to Telugu industry? That's something that one can always discuss, and that's all certainly because we are talking about new. Since I have also worked in the area of YouTube and platform society, where YouTube is certainly giving you new vocabulary such as creative labor, unlikely creative class. So the new things are emerging. The people from the rural YouTube channels are emerging from the rural India, and unlikely sectors that would get into kind of Telugu industry, or any entertainment industry, are getting because of the new platform society that we are having. So that's another question that I would like you to kind of consider and discuss. So this is something that I want to kind of uh, share with you, and more and more discussion or questions probably can be discussed once you guys have anything to say.
Thank you very much, Vamshi, for this presentation, where you kind of picked up the way in which this film talks and yet does not talk about caste. So it was a very interesting ground from where we can, I think, start off discussion. Swarnavel says, "Hi all, glad to be here. Could you suggest names of Dalit themed or filmmaker driven films in Telugu and Kannada?" Dalit filmmaker films in Telugu and Kannada, he's asking. So probably by the end of this discussion, we'll have some names up there on the chat box. So anyone who would like to begin either responding to the film or responding to Vamshi's presentation, you're most welcome. please unmute yourselves or raise hands so that I know that you want to speak. Yeah, so there's a question in the chat box. Nishi Pulgurta, I was wondering if multiplex has brought about any changes in subject matter or presentation of characters in Telugu films. Vamshi, what do you think? Multiplex.
Yeah, certainly. That's what I was kind of trying to address. Yes, multiplex has given. Initially, it started out to be kind of very elitist and very limited audience, but the multiplex and the new OTT, it is certainly is going to give a good opportunities, and the the amount of channels that are coming up and the number of channels that are coming up and amount of content that has been produced in YouTube at this moment, and the kind of themes that they address, certainly this new technology has given uh, new avenues for the people to kind of express themselves creatively and financially. Also, it's a very viable model, so hence it is happening. But I was not sure about multiplex. Yes, some small movies they could survive, but multiplex model is also very difficult. For example, I was talking about those four people. So those four people actually control entire theater system and multiplex system. So if they don't buy the cinema, your cinema will never be visible. You may have to depend again on YouTube and other stuff. Luckily, in this case also, care of Kancharapalem, we are talking about so many other things, but at the end of the day, Suresh Productions, Suresh Babu, who is also who is son of legendary producer Rama Naidu, who has a lot of lot of theaters in Telangana. The only two people who control entire Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, majorly about theaters and all, Dil Raju and Suresh Babu. So Suresh Babu is one who bought the movie and kind of released it. So it is Suresh Babu who could afford to release this kind of movies and made sure that it reaches the audience, whether it is multiplex or single theater. So yes, there is a hope when it comes to multiplex and alternative like OTT. Uh, but however, it's still very personality driven, and it's very controlled by a couple of people and couple of studios, as far as Telugu cinema industry is concerned, at least.
Yeah, maybe just to get the discussion going while everyone collects their thoughts, I'll kind of talk about one or two issues. One, Vamshi, I was thinking of films like Mallesham. You mentioned Palasa. Recently, there was this other film, I think it's called Middle Class Melodies.
Melodies, yeah.
Yeah, so these smaller films, which I know you think that it would be an overestimation to call it as some new trend or new cinema coming into Telugu because of all the reasons that you outlined. Because this is still very much, one-off kind of happenings. It's not like regularly, and it still needs Suresh Productions backing to be able to, get in any sense, get an opportunity to reach the people and all that. So you mentioned that. So I was wondering how you would see these kind of films like Mallesham, for instance, which it's not one of those big blockbusters. It's not a star-driven film. So again, which bucks the trend. So one aspect is that. The second, and for me, the very interesting aspect about this film, which again, since I'm watching a lot of Kannada films, Kannada new wave films, this film also seems to share a characteristic feature of many of the Kannada new films, is the manner of narration itself. The way in which all the stories seem to be happening in contemporary times when we're watching it, because the intercuts seem to suggest that these are parallel stories that are happening, and only in the end we realize that no, they're actually sequential. Recently, there was a Kannada film, recently meaning a couple of years ago, a Kannada film by, again, a new director called Adarsh Ishwarappa, his film called Shuddhi, where there are two such parallel tracks, and only in the end we realize that one of them is actually something that happened in the past, and the other one is the present. And you mentioned how it is such a carefully crafted film thematically. I think it's a very carefully crafted film also in terms of its narration, in terms of form, in the way it chooses to tell the story through different actors playing the same character, giving them different names. So generally the trend is when you go to the past in Indian cinema, maybe the son of the star will play the younger person's role, or
Yeah.
in films like I have a film like Ganesh 99, which is a remake of the Telugu film 96, where Ganesh can play a teenager as well as someone who is 30 or whatever. So the hero can do any range, right? So the way Maha's film chooses different actors to play different characters, to play the same character at different stages of life, also tells me that here is a filmmaker who wants to surprise his audience.
Yes.
So the experiments that he is making in narration too, I think is very, very interesting. So about these 2 points, one about though not a steady stream, but now and then films like Malesham or Palasa coming, and second, this aspect of narration, which is again very new to Telugu cinema. And the third point, which I want to quickly make, which you mentioned, this film Jayam Manadera, where caste is so central, I think, in that film, and yet you have a star. I think Chiranjeevi is the
Venkatesh, ma'am.
Venkatesh.
Yeah.
So Venkatesh playing, this very this person who tries to cast himself as casteless or rising above
Yes, yes.
caste, and so
Yes, yes.
all that. Why, even while the entire film is about placing, certain castes or Dalits within certain known frameworks or paradigms. So these three aspects, if you want to comment.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. The first one is, yeah, I agree with you. The movies like, Malaysian, very interesting. And also one should, certainly it is very hopeful that, a new wave that we are excited to call, we see the symptoms, certainly. We are not, I do not think we have reached that stage. We have to be very consistent. At least the Telugu cinema, you can't really believe. And because we don't have that kind of, conducive environment, and either ideological environment or, the production wise, because the industry, the nature of industry is very different compared to other industries. You take Bollywood, you take Kannada industry, you take Tamil industry, I don't know much about Malayalam, but I'm sure you don't see any film industry in the world where the crew comes from one region. Maybe the heroines come from Bombay. uh, I'm not saying there are, of course there are exceptions, but very few exceptions. You can't have that kind of industry where the hero comes from, the producer comes from, the actors come from, and the editors come from, cinematographers come from, even heroines. But of late, heroines also come from, across south and north, come from one particular region. See, when you have such situation, you don't get new stories. See, in order to have a new story, you need to come from a that story has to come from the director, right? He has to hear somewhere, he has to experience it. If he comes from, see, for example, Malaysian, you are talking about Palasa, Kancharapalam, you should also understand where do they come from. They come from Uttarandhra, Telangana, or so far nothing has come from Rayalaseema, but it would, if you see something, it would come from Rayalaseema, because these are the stories we have never heard, so that we also see is little refreshing and all. That is one thing. So it's quite a problematic. Malaysian, I absolutely see the point, but Malaysian also, you should understand the way the Telugu industry, cinema industry is trying to kind of deal with certain themes that are related to Telangana, and the dialect, the importance of dialect that it has got in recent Telugu cinema, especially last 10-15 movies of big stars, where the stars themselves either talk about Telangana dialect, or their stories, or significant comedians who come from this particular uh, region. Yes, Nishi was talking about Darasani. Yeah, Darasani also talks about this, the cast, and it's very interesting. I want to talk about Darasani, but after this, yeah. So the Malaysian also would come under that, but at the end of the day, Malaysian also, it almost like the entire KTR had to come and do a lot of promotion, endorsement, a lot of stuff, but it is certainly a very good movement for the cinema industry. It's good for them, it's good for the industry, not just for the kind of viewers. Viewers would go for net. If they don't get good cinema, they will go to Netflix and watch movies. They don't have any problems. They are not the losers. The industry is going to lose. That is one thing. The second thing is about narration. Absolutely, I agree with you. There are few movies, even Lucy and other movies, I mean, this kind of new, yeah, those movies, they have been trying with new formats. Telugu cinema industry is actually, the reason that I narrated, it is still stuck with that. And when you when the discussion in the industry that this is the way we should come out and all, they certainly don't agree that no, we are trying to make good movies and all. But in that way, Care of Kancharapalam certainly is a kind of fresh intervention in terms of screenplay, uh, and the way the story has been told. And it's kind of, you may actually question it. It's not so convincing why Sundaram, Raju, Joseph having different religions, different stories. uh, that's something that even one of the interviews there to say that please don't ask that question, because he wanted to weave that kind of story. That's the reason why I was not comfortable, because it is our cast. It's about Dalit story. I mean, you can simply tell a Dalit story, because Maha Venkatesh is not a, he must have kind of, seen movies that actually dealt with similar themes that didn't really have, great box office success. So I strongly think that the way it is been little, made up with this religion issue, and also the sequence, the changing little sequence, playing with, surprisingly, Joseph dies first. Joseph's story dies first. Then the Gundam story dies. Then the child story dies. Then you come to Raju. So it's very interesting way to play with. That's one, ma'am. The third one, ma'am, I
Jayam Manadera, about
yeah.
Jayam Manadera and yeah.
Yeah. Jay
He
Manada
show up us.
is
Yeah.
a very typical Telugu cinema, where the hero. That's also another season when the cast markers started appearing for the heroes.
Mm.
Earlier, the usual names like Ramu, Gopi, they don't have any cast markers. So here we have a clear cast marker, that is Kama, the hero's father. Surname will tell you that he comes from a particular community, and he is the agency there. He wants to save Dalit community and he works for them, and that is are part of the story. They are not the persons who lead the story, but they're just part of the story. They either fight for the hero or fight with Dalits to honor the hero's reputation. And this is the kind of very typical theme that has been there running right from the beginning. The certain movies like Palasa is something, it's kind of changing its narrative. I mean, it should have also have a lot of courage I don't get the kind of platform to release their movies. So in that way, probably YouTube and Netflix and Prime and all, there is some new platform called AHA, which is again, owned by Allu Aravind. So it's also difficult to escape from this, rigid system that is controlled by them, but also little scope is there still. And about Dorasani that I forgot, Dorasani is also about this the cast thing. But the actor, I mean, I'm not talking about the movie, but I just wanted to tell you one simple interview bit. It was so funny that actually tells you that summarize the Telugu industry's situation, both audience and the industry. The actor is Vijay Deverakonda, you might know. Arjun Reddy's actor, Vijay Deverakonda's brother.
Yeah.
So in one of the interviews, the hero's mother was talking about the movie. She started Dora. Dora means feudal lord. Dora, and in Telangana, Dora means it's also feudal lord, but are known to be Velamas. Velama is another intermediate community. They're like kind of Kshatriyas. Incidentally, which Vijay Deverakonda also belonged to. So the hero's mother was saying in one of the interviews that though we are Doras, our son never acted like Dora. I mean, she didn't mean it. I'm not really kind of blaming it. See, that this is the kind of stuff that happens in Telugu film industry. You'll be surprised. That's why you don't get this kind of movies.
Yeah. Anyone else who'd like to come in now? Yeah, please unmute yourself. Yeah, Swarnavel, please go ahead.
Yes, thanks a lot. I came a little late, but
that's
you
fine.
were very articulate, and thanks a lot. And also, that it's a very wonderful film, a very warm film, and what I liked about it is that it stays, with these love stories, that because nowadays, even when, as you already said, when more stronger or more highly politically overt, wonderful films are made on caste issues, particularly in Tamil. But I think the beauty of this film is that it might reach more across the middle classes, whose conscience it should actually address, because of its format, because of the interweaving of these four love stories, and as you rightly pointed out, it gradually goes more deeper. Initially it looks like a continuity of very well made, nice, well-meaning, middle of the road cinema of the past, but then gradually get into depth. It makes an impact also because there is a sense of realism which is developed not only through the non-actors we see, many of them, but also, because of the way the space, plays into it, because of, that staying with the location, and because you have so many characters, we are able to get so many slices, which again, I think is important because, that is the sense of realism, which will posit that these different, or supposedly other, characters are not, isolated and elsewhere, that they live in one particular spot in a city, they are here, they're ubiquitous, So this is important for the film because, that we know that it is being staged, in one particular area, but because it is weaving these stories, I think, that enables, for us to identify with that thing. Also, I think the other important thing about this film is that that nowadays, focusing on romance has become, in a way, one could say, as a lesser value. Even with all these OTT platforms, you can see with Netflix and Amazon, it is about the darkness, about this heightened violence. So, I mean, so when things are towards the serial killer and, things are towards the psychopath. This is drawing from a certain kind of nostalgia of an earlier cinema to address today's politics, today's choices, which people will have to make. So I think that quality, I think that legacy, Telugu cinema always has. That is, it is not much written about, but that earlier, some of the Telugu comedies or some of the in-between actors you had, they always had, this element of good romantic scenes, but that got lost because of the larger necessity to perform these over the top comedies. But if you look at there were always good writers in that sense, who could write within the studio kind of structure, or within the feudal kind of structure we had. But I see that those kind of traces have been expanded, and that and I think it is a very productive film. It's a very productive film because it is not one of those middle of the road films which as I have argued that that what way, like one could say independent cinema is different from the middle class. So one way I propose is that, see, if you look at the middle of the road films, say Basu Chatterjee or Gulzar Rishikesh Mukherjee, to just talk about something which all of you might be familiar with. They will be treating wonderful subjects, and more genuinely than in the mainstream. Like if you look at Jaya Baudry with Cancer in Millie, or this thing. Or in Abhiman, between two singers, husband and wife, that jealousy. But then finally it will come to a certain kind of a closure, which is comfortable for the middle class audience, that it is addressed, it's accepted. But here, in the case of independent cinema, that it should be like little bit, it should push that limit, that it should make the middle class uncomfortable, towards the closure. That is why you call it, they are independent, in some way, at least in the spirit. If not, even today they have to rely on, if not, now that is gone, but like Miramax, which would be on the fringes, but yet it would be a studio, controlled by, people who are equally feudal in a way. Those struggles are there, but the spirit would be there, that it is, taking this bold step, So it is doing that, this film is doing that. And it is also important, as you really pointed out, to do this kind of intervention in Telugu, which is much more challenging, than say, as you rightly pointed out, to do it, in other, adjacent, like in Malayalam, or nowadays, not earlier, but say nowadays in Tamil, where you can, perhaps, push the limit, and if you are lucky, have an audience, people come and sponsor. It is gradual. I mean, those Tamil filmmakers would strongly argue, that we are able to produce, but yet we are struggling to find an audience. But yet we know, that to make such intervention in Telugu is relatively even more difficult. So at this point of time, I mean, to conceive of something, because I think that, with so much of, dumping, of, because of the OTT, films, all around, how to survive, that yes, you can make, because with the digital, production is possible, but then how to exhibit and, distribute and make your next film, that again is important. So I think this structure fits that as well, because, it has something to offer, for various demographics, of audiences, not only the youth, but you have the middle age, and you have also the contrast. Also you have the, the classical figure of the prostitute, canonical figure, at the same time, with very modern predicaments, very modern dilemmas. So I would also, acknowledge and, give a nod to the writing. I think it is very well written. Because one of the difficulty about writing romantic films in this particular era, when faith in kind of, that, the intensity of love is, falling away because of so many reasons, that it is not one reason. It is at the, Telugu cinema, which is so much identified with the figure of Devdas, because even in Tamil, see, it is Nageshwar Rao, Garu and Savitri, who are the main players, and that it is still identified as, that not directly to Bengal from where it came, but to Telugu cinema, this idea of the romantic lover. And that trope is somehow juxtaposed, with the other romances, this larger than life mythic figure of NTR, his early beautiful films, his fantasies, when he was the charmer and AK, Narishwara was this very sensitive lover, and you had this, great tradition. And to see, that kind of a legacy, that still, that one could write, screenplay believing in love at the same time, addressing the issue of, what is so topical for us now, caste. So that is what I would say. Thanks and congratulations, for the team. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Vamshi, any response? Anything you want to say? Do you want to come in at this point, Vamshi?
Yeah, ma'am, I agree with him. Most of the points, as far as romantic and love story, that the kind of love story that it presents, even in terms of love story, it is so refreshing when it comes to when it's compared to other mainstream Telugu cinema, and the kind of the way it plays out, it's rare to kind of see. I mean, we always used to have the social realism and cinema in academia, to discuss, the various Bengali and Malayali movies, and play out, right? It is when at least Kancharapalem, in a sense, it's not a kind of documentary. It's very much mainstream movie, though certain characters' inexperience is very visible on the screen, and the inexperience, you can certainly experience the inexperience on the screen. At the same time, you just forgive them for being so real. Just flow, just travel with the kind of characters that are presented, in the movie. So in that way, it's so refreshing, certain.
Yeah, like Titi, I think it uses mainly non-actors, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think none of them are actually actors.
Okay.
Even one of the actor is a producer. Salima, the character
Yes, yes.
played by, Salima is played by the producer, none other than the producer, and
Okay.
she's also, I mean, I don't know why
Percurated.
I'm just thinking, they got the Christian thing, because Christian thing is very known, because most of the Dalits convert to Christianity, not to Islam. That's a reality. Second thing is that maybe they wanted to kind of play with Vinayak Ganesha that the Hinduism done, the Christianity. So they want to kind of, once the Joseph loses his battle, so he leaves his cross and leaves it in the church, and so they wanted to bring, Islam and Muslims character as well. I that's what I guess. Otherwise, I didn't see, I mean, very well into the kind of, into cinema. And also the producer, since she's Indian American, she didn't know much Telugu, so maybe I was just thinking, you know uh, maybe,
Okay.
typical, Muslims who are not really comfortable with Telugu, kind of that kind of stuff. I don't know. I'm just kind of wild guess.
Okay.
But
Anyone else? Yeah.
I would like to respond to this. That is, but it is a very important aspect. That is,
Yeah.
if you look at I come from Tirunelveli, which is very near the Kanyakumari, the coastal area, and also I have a lot of relatives with Kerala, Tamil Nadu border, from Trivandrum and Kerala, that side. So you can see the history of conversion along that belt, Christianity. Not only of the fisher folk, but also a little inside if you go Dalit communities, and those missionaries, I mean, it is scholars have written, that have done a lot for education, including what we can see in today's Dalit literacy or literacy in Nagarkoil. But that is not addressed, that Dalit Christian thing, So I do not think, I mean, it is addressed, in the past, but not marking them as, their history is not marked. You can see, like, for example, in a film like Alegal Oivadillai, or that with Satyaraj, that film which Bharati Raja made in Nagarkoil. You have Rekha, the heroine, with all those churches and all that. Or Gautam Menon today, uses them for his mainstream work. You have nice backdrops for this, but they don't get into this history. They will just have this figure, she is from a Christian falling in love with the Hindu, but we don't get this, the history of it. Then, it is like easy for us to assume because a lot of middle class people also, got converted in the higher class. So maybe, he is addressing that. So that way also it is very important to address this, So that I think is also significant about this film.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyone else would like to come in now?
Can I come
Yeah,
in?
Geeta, go ahead.
Yeah, Nikhila, as you pointed out,
Yeah, Geeta, we are not able to hear you.
okay, can you hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. I too, like you, found the
Mm.
structure of the film very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And if, as Raju says in the end, all those characters are himself, then it's also not just about all the, I mean, different actors playing the same character, but it's also about the structuring of time itself,
Yeah.
like across time. So, in that sense, if time has kind of, progressed towards acceptance of love across certain barriers. In Raju's case, it is the, barriers of region, language, and class. Uh, like Vamshi was saying, this film, like kind of obfuscates the issue of caste and to some extent religion as well. I was wondering what if this, if it had to end with either an intercaste or an interreligious relationship, would the villagers have stood in support of them, even if it was in the present time? Like, have they progressed in their thinking with time, or are they accepting it because it is, not as major a rift as caste and religion? It's just a matter of language and, class. One is an attendant, the other is an officer, and not really anything very, like groundbreaking. That's one thing. And another thing is, since it is so well structured and everything, fits in so nicely, I was just wondering why so much screen time was given to the sculptor, Sundaram's father. Like, what was the significance? Of course, independently, it is a very poignant story, his passion and then the way he wants to make that a statue and things like that. But how does it, fit into the larger narrative was something I was thinking about. That's all.
Yeah. Thanks, Geeta. Yeah, Vamshi, do you have anything to say about the Geeta's points?
Yeah. The first one is very interesting, ma'am. Uh, yeah, what would the villagers, say or stand? There is a very interesting scene at the railway tracks. When the Raju is beaten up at the end, the villagers come and stand with him. Not just the barber and the priest and the cleaner. The three people who actually accompany Raju all the time, and the people who also kind of they connect it with the childhood memories and all. Mm, yes. I don't know. I mean, if the movie really talks about intercaste marriage, the movie wouldn't have been this way in a sense. Either the movie would be the kind of talking point only for intercaste marriages, not the love story. Uh, in that way, I agree with the director that the movie would have the locus standi of the movie would have become something else. Uh, Despite saying that, yes, love story is certainly the kind of soul for this movie, but not talking about certain realities. At least, in a way, it has to be kind of addressed. That's something that I was not really convinced. But I agree with uh, uh, the point that is mentioned, is that what would be the situation of Joseph if they have agreed for the marriage. uh, the story would have ended in a uh, not ended in the same way. I mean, the Raju wanted to always to tell the story that the humanism is very important. From Hindu to Christian to the way he moved to the humanism, where having two three friends, having a owner who is okay to pay the rent couple of days later, or to having a friend like a priest, who always does lot of archanas, a lot of pujas on his name, is enough than going to temple. And so that was something that the kind of the recurring theme that he wanted to present. So somewhere he wanted to kind of avoid this this urgency to close the matter, to address the matter there. That's what I felt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tarakeshwar has.
Oh, sorry. No, my question was that it appears to end on a note of hope, the film.
Yes.
But is it enough cause for celebration is what I was wondering. And another thing about the film is this issue of how homosexuality is represented. I mean, it probably is a minor theme, but it is like
Hmm.
used
Yes.
as a joke. Nattuvadu, he's referred to as, and even the daughter of that woman he is in love with, she also like uses it as a joke in order to like make out whether she's whether the man her mother is going to marry is actually serious about her. And also in the end, like he
Yeah.
wants her to she wants him to elope with her mother. So she again uses the trope of the homosexual, to make him actually come out and run away with the mother. So that's also slightly, problematic, the way it has been used in this instrumentalist
Yeah.
fashion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, I agree. The Nattugadu is a very, kind of, it continues the kind of, montage that, Telugu cinema is known for. The Telugu cinema is known, Telugu cinema plays this kind of, very cheap theatrics all the time in the mainstream cinema. But yeah, this cinema too continues that legacy in a sense. Maybe I should add that the point also. The way it deals with caste question. It avoids and evades the crucial point. So in the same way, even this issue too, in this way also it kind of avoids and it goes into the. But one way it kind of in a way that if you want to look at the director's point of view, it is so natural because he's talking about Kancharapalam, one place where talking about portraying certain lives and all, so natural for, because he also, one of the interviews talks about, one of the dialogue that has been censored in the movie, that is bastard in Telugu, the word Telugu. So he had a lot of fights with censorship board where he argued that this word is quite common, not kind of always derogatory. It's always sometimes evoke laughter, and that's how he convinced. So he director was saying that one of the censor board member asked him, why do you use gender centric abusive marks to evoke laughter or hate. So that's where the director didn't have any answer to kind of that question. Why this word? Why should you use only this word that has this kind of markers? So probably the censorship should have asked this question also. Probably would have censored it. But one way to kind of positively look at it, but absolutely in other sense, it continues Telugu cinema industry's obsession, and there are at least in recent times at least 3 to 4 Telugu cinema hits that explicitly use this homosexual figure as a site of ridicule and laughter. It's a big cinemas, not just some B grade or C grade, big cinemas that they use. That's one thing. I absolutely agree with you. And the first question that I could not answer is that whether it gives you hope. Uh, it gives you hope only in terms of the first question that I raised. There are two reasons why the movie is interesting. In terms of production values, the content, the characterization, the way it challenges Telugu cinema and all. The second one, the way it is seen as a love story only, not as a as something else, that discusses exposes certain realities. So the Raju's character is lovely and very humane to watch, but it's also tragedy, because it's a hope. There is a hope that he still has life after 50, but there is a story that he failed because of certain social realities that cinema failed to convey. If you see the other movie Palasa, which explicitly talks about that, it doesn't talk about love story. It talks about exploitation by Shaukar brothers, traders, trading communities, where these two trading community, the brothers cheat Dalits in cashew processing units, and the way they pitch their Dalit community to each other, and they fight together, and they just lose the battle, and then their empire stays on, and the kind of resistance to that particular empire building and all. That's where the actual talk is all about. The kind of dialogues that are they used, and certain themes and the dialogues were taken from Kalyan Rao's Untouchable Spring. So in that way, Palasa is more interesting in terms of Dalit themes, and the way they deployed Dalit themes, then compared to Kancharapalam, very soft, continues the legacy, at the same time tells you a Dalit story, in a more, try to be part of the mainstream, and deal with the business. Yeah.
Yeah, Tarakeshwar, go ahead.
Thank you, Vamshi, for giving us a snapshot of the anxieties, hopes that exist in the Telugu film industry today, especially vis-a-vis the question of caste. I think how do we visualize caste on screen? It's a very interesting question. Our caste and Indian cinema is a very interesting question. It always animates us. So I was wondering, you could gauge from the film that it is about a Dalit issue, but you are not happy with the way it has been handled. If you could understand that it is a caste issue or Dalit issue, then the film has made you to understand it. So I don't see there is a failure of the film to make you understand. So it has been raised, but the way it has been resolved within the narrative, we need to make the issue between raising the issue or making it visible within the visual narrative and the way it gets resolved. And when they make a point that is a realistic narrative, then you can't expect the director to intervene and force the uh, ending in a particular way too, because it has to take its own
Natural
course of action depending on the what they perceive as the reality of the context, locale, and the characters too. So, and then the other issue is about the issue. One is the question of caste, and then the issue of Dalit. So, I don't know what is a Dalit film. When a Dalit makes a film, does it become a Dalit film? Or when a Dalit is casted as a hero, does it become a Dalit film? Or does it become a Dalit film only when there is a particular way of representing the caste relations which are exploitative? If you show caste relations in a way it is not exploitative, or to the degree of exploitation that you expect it to be, then it is not a Dalit. So what do we mean by a Dalit film or a Dalit theme? So does it depend on the makers of the film, or the uh, visibility of a particular character uh, on screen for a long time, or casting it as a protagonist, or does it depends on representing the caste issue, or representing the caste issue as the exploitative relation between different caste communities? So I think we need to think through these issues. Uh, and I think anybody who knows the coastal Andhra, because the film is set in coastal Andhra, would know that uh, the Christianity is a caste issue. So it has nothing to do with religion. So you could guess it because you know the context of coastal Andhra. So even the film doesn't explicitly say it, you could guess it because it is made for a particular Telugu audience. Without saying it, they would understand it. So you don't have to make it so explicit too. And the second uh, point is that it is not simply shown as Christianity, but conversion. So the word conversion comes often in relation to Christianity there. So there is enough clue within the narrative to say that it is actually a caste issue.
Yeah.
And then uh, about these three so-called parallel narratives, uh, and then becoming sequential at the end. It's a very interesting narrative. Uh, though they're made sequential at the end of the character of Raju's life, it could also be metaphorical. It is also the way in which the issues of caste, issues of religion, issues of class, issues of region, which Gita unwittingly mentioned in the beginning, all coming together in a narrative. So it's a sleight of hand at the end. All these things come together, and I think the way the narrative resolves some of these issues is the problem actually. Not in the sense of not raising the issue of caste, not raising the issue of religion, not raising the issue of fundamentalist notions about religion or region, but where it tries to, the narrative ends in such a way that a true love could transcend all these things. And one has to stand for this true love. So that kind of the narrative posing a romance as a kind of answer to all these complex socio-historical political problems, I would see that as a problem, not that it is not raising the issue of caste. It is raising the issue of caste, but the narrative, how it resolves the issue it raises, is more important. And then the other point that I wanted to say, I think about the villagers. See, this is where the question of Nattugadu would come in. So, Raju, they have no problem with Raju. The problem with Raju is that he is not married. So, being a single is a threat to a particular kind of society in which we are living. So, in order to make Raju get married, maybe they are able to transcend certain barriers, which otherwise they wouldn't. And it is also not simply about being a Nattugadu. It is also the question of not simply homosexuality, not being simply single, because visually it comes in a point in the narrative that it is also a pedophile. So a boy, and that is not simply a question of representation of homosexuality too. So there is another dimension too that we can't simply reduce to that. So there is a single being a threat, and then the question of pedophile, and then the question of Nattugadu. Nattugadu is also strategically used by the daughter. She knows she's smiling when she's saying it. She wants to provoke him because she knows that it works with him. Because the one who is not ready to get married gets married when it becomes a big issue. That is in that regard in the village. So the villagers coming there and trying to, they're not doing anything. They're simply standing there. But you can read the narrative in any way. So in that sense, the film is not saying many things, but saying it to a certain kind of audience. But I would say that the way film resolves the issues that it raises is thinking that a romance will be able to uh, uh, cross all these barriers. So that's where I see it as a kind of simplistic resolution of the issues, complex socio-historical issues that it has raised. But it may be necessary, otherwise, 70 lakh cinema wouldn't have so, uh, had 7 crore in the box office. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Tarakeshwar. Arun also has raised his hand, so maybe we'll take Arun's response and then go back to Vamshi if he has anything to say. Arun, please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Hello, all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a couple of observations. Maybe it may sound repetitive, but anyway, I'll share them, and I'll try to be terse. Okay. So it's first of all, this is a very charming film. As I started watching it, it reminded me so much of Angamali Diaries, the very beginning and all. How much it's a perfect example of location cinema. You know, it's strongly rooted uh, in a particular place which has its own idiosyncrasies and all that. You know, it's a fresh change from all the other mainstream films, which are almost always uh, placed in these non-places. You know, it's the same all the time. Yeah. I also I had also noted down the issue of that the homosexual element. So the problem is Raju is not performing his gender. That is, his gendered role as a heterosexual man uh, in a convincing way, which will convince his society, his village. So the questions will come up like what makes a heterosexual man? What are the actions that a heterosexual man has to do to assert his identity, or what are the actions that a homosexual man has to do to be assigned that identity or to assert it by himself. Yeah. So that was interesting, and I felt somewhat unsettled that the director didn't actually intervene. Uh, like the issue of this gay homosexual thing is discussed within the film, but the director didn't actually intervene from his part. It was swept under the mattress silently. I thought maybe someone or something could have happened, uh, to find a kind of resolution to that topic. Uh, Kind of a hopeful thing, but it didn't happen. So the purpose is quite, uh, it's quite clear. So that was the butt of the joke. Yeah. Another thing that I was wondering is, so this lady, she is from Odisha, and her brother and her daughter is also, they have been staying there in Vizag, I guess. So, but when they are fighting, when they are fighting within the family members, I didn't understand why they are not using Odia, and she was talking in Hindi, they were talking in Hindi, and also Telugu. Telugu, she was talking in Telugu as a kind of resistant action, I guess. I don't know. It was an act of resistance, probably. But I was wondering why they didn't talk in Odia. Yeah. Yeah. Mm, Another thing, also the Sundaram's father was also another interesting character, and he was almost tragicomic, apart from his suicide, which is absolutely tragic. Other than that, his like his agency being taken away from him because he is mute. Uh, uh, was was portrayed in kind of a tragicomic way, but I was glad that he was literate. He was not. He could at least write and express what he wanted to say, rather than the usual figures we see in most films. Where a kind of illiterate mute person will be shown as somebody who's yearning for the sympathy of the audience, somebody like that. But it was not like that. He was quite self-assertive. Yeah. Another thing, uh, uh, yeah, the narrative aspect. Interestingly, the only reference to, or I think only the only factor to show that these narratives are happening at different temporalities is the songs. If you look at the songs, the settings of the songs are appropriate to the era. We might miss it because because of the smooth flow of the film. But if we rewatch the songs, it's quite visible. Uh, the settings are quite clear. And I also felt that the climax was somewhat forced, to appease the general audience. I think it should have ended sometime before all that. Then I would have been a lot happier, at least. I don't know. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Arun, for those different kinds of remarks and different aspects of the film. Sanjay Kumar has raised his hand. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I had a couple of points, but now I'll focus only on a few of them because other people have already talked about them. One issue is like Tarakeshwar was raising is the singledom. That what I see in our society, that how single people are looked at and what kind of discriminations they face. Like you can go to rent an apartment and they will ask you whether you are married or not. Only married people are allowed. If you say you are married, where is your wife? Where is your husband? Children? All that kind of questions are asked. So, like getting married is supposed to be a kind of achievement. It's a personal achievement. It's a kind of qualification. So if somebody is not married, then they are supposed to be not qualified enough to get integrated in the society. So that is shown in the film where we see that children are playing volleyball and he says that you should jump like that and then one child says that you shut up, you something like you are unmarried, you have not even married, you don't have that much experience or something like that he says. And the old lady also makes fun of him when she says that she's going to live for another year as the priest has predicted. And so she's making a fun of him that, but finally what happens that it is not just limited to the kind of joke or the kind of suggestions people make to him that you must get married, all kinds of advices he gets from the people, but it is in a way criminalized also. So you can see that the singledom has been criminalized. Okay, and that's a reflection of society whosoever either marries late or doesn't marry faces these kind of problems. Another is, so basically, what I believe is it has something to do with the ideology of the family. That their main concern is the reproduction of the dominant patriarchal system. So if you do not participate in the perpetuation of that dominant patriarchal system, then there is something problematic for the society. So they will keep on pointing out that why you are not getting married. The other issue of religion has already been discussed, so I will skip that. Then I think there is this character, Amuru, who has been addressed as uncle by Bhargavi, that he is working for a minister. And the minister, initially we see in the film that minister has asked him to beat up somebody who had abused him in the meeting, and that person belongs to an opposition political party. So but it has something to do with the romantic, probably the compulsion of the genre of romantic comedy, that this person we see only of this phase of him, that he is promoting the romantic relationship and he is good. Obviously, Bhargavi has saved his life, so he is grateful, but in a way, he is a very large-hearted. And but there are a couple of scenes where, for example, he is asking his henchmen to bribe voters, and he has own political ambitions. He also wants to stand in some election, and he's asking his henchmen to focus only on voters, to bribe them, but not on other people who are not voters. So this aspect is not very much highlighted, but it is there as undercurrent. And one more point about the train as a prop. From the beginning, we see the train comes, and there are certain moments in the film where train is used. For example, when this character Gadam, he is insisting that Salima should show her face, and when finally Salima shows her face, then he finds that she is the prostitute who met him earlier. So after that, this character is shown to be sitting just near the railway track, and there is this whistle of the train, this noise of the train, which shows the inner turmoil of the character. So that is one moment. Another is where Raju is cycling to attend this meeting where he has been summoned for a hearing at Panchayat. So the train is moving in a parallel way and he's also cycling. Both are in the same direction. So that is one dramatic moment of the film. Another one is towards the end. It's the climax scene. That is obvious, where Raju is, is walking briskly and he's noticed by his friends, 3 of his friends who are drinking, and they are calling him, but he doesn't listen and he keeps on moving. And finally, exactly at that moment, the train comes. And since the train comes, they are not able to catch him by the time the train crosses. So this level crossing has been used skillfully. And then he's already away. Then we see that he has already crossed and he is already moving very fast. And then finally, when he is being chased by the brother of Radha, that time he says, they are approaching, and all of a sudden train comes. So he's not, both of them, they are not able to cross the level crossing. So they are trapped and he's beaten up also. And then one person who has been busy beating him, then he he's standing and all of a sudden he looks. So that time, I don't know, I was thinking probably Radha has gone to commit suicide. She has been run down by the train, or something tragic has happened. But there are people around, and then we see that, okay, the whole village is there. On the one side there is this village of Raju, and on this side this another village. So that adds to the dramatization of the plot, in the narrative. So train as a prop, I think, has been used very beautifully in this film. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else would like to speak?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please go ahead. Nikhil, please go ahead.
Okay. Uh, I think last year, a movie, or a year before that, a Tamil movie was released called Super Deluxe.
Yeah.
That is also, I think, story where four separate stories come together at a point towards the end. So, where would Vamshi like to put this film with comparison to Super Deluxe in terms of its making, the quality, acting, and then also the narrative structure? Because I think over there they handle the issue of a transgender character, and then here there is this talk of homosexuality. So maybe if there are certain parallels, or it is because of the cultural differences that this has been slightly different in the treatment of the subject.
Yeah, Vamshi,
Yeah, ma'am.
if you're familiar with Super Deluxe.
Yeah. Super Deluxe. I just know, I didn't watch the movie. I know that it's about transgender, and it's by Vijay Sethupathi, right?
Vijay Sethupathi plays that role.
Yes. Thank you. So, I mean, the issue of homosexuality, as others pointed out, it also talks about the kind of legacy that Telugu film industry is grappling with. It is not whether it is new wave cinema, or bit social realistic cinema, or a different cinema, different genre altogether, but certain things that is still not able to find the right path, and they take this kind of aspects for granted. That's absolutely right from Geeta's question to Tarakeshwar, then Arun, and everybody's talking about being single. They just take that kind of for granted, to generate certain laughter, to generate some comedy. And this is not the movie. I mean, of course, since this is a little different movie, we have been discussing about it. But this couple of movies in recent releases, all of them actually used this site of generate comedy and kind of sense of ridicule, or there are exotic feelings and all this stuff. That's something that I have observed. I don't think the Telugu cinema has reached that stage where it will certainly appreciate. For example, you see Lawrence movie Kanchana. In that movie, also Sharath Kumar kind of acted as a transgender, but it has its own dimensions to it, kind of somewhere it connects to the myth of being transgender, being very not as a human, but superhuman, little religious, very good, and she always if she or he kind of blesses you, that kind of popular myth. So Telugu industry believes in Kanchana kind of transgender than the transgender that is super. I have not watched, but here and there I've kind of watched it and watched the trailer. That's something that I cannot really comment on without watching that movie. And the other comments are absolutely, I absolutely agree. Most of the comments, especially in Arun's and Tarakeshwar's, the question of Dalit text, not Dalit movie, that I would like to kind of talk about. But what's wrong with the movie? Actually, most of you kind of narrated what's wrong with the movie. Despite giving you a refreshing view, refreshing story, despite giving you what is not there in Telugu industry, but despite all this stuff, it still stick to the basics. Probably that's the reason why Suresh Production still bought it, and it's become a reasonable hit. That's where I want to also connect it to Tarakeshwar's basic question of what do you call Dalit film. It's like question of what do we call it, Dalit text. Is it Dalit was right or Dalit theme? It's a larger question that it's a big question that we can really decide and resolve at this moment. But what I was not happy that the reason why I mentioned that it was because it if it doesn't talk about caste, nobody's going to ask about the movie. I mean, nobody's going to ask you because Telugu industry never talks about caste anyway. But it somewhere it talks about caste. Somewhere it talks about interreligious conversations, relations. But in a sense, the movie uses them as a crucial trope or crucial what do you say, crucial commercial aspect to bring the exotic feelings about a love story. That's what I felt in a sense. It was not so convincing. You wouldn't have to, they don't have to tell you that it's converted and all. You would have created some other aspect. For example, create a class, not a problem. Still, the hundreds of movies that been there, and you still create a class feeling and still get away with it. In fact, I was just watching for this. I didn't watch movie to talk about to talk here, but I was watching a lot of interviews of director. I thought I wanted to really understand what does he think. One of the anchor would actually asked him, why do you use this religious figures? You would have easily skipped them by giving some other markers. He actually didn't have an answer. He said just like that. Just maybe to kind of try to tell you that love kind of is beyond religions. The religions are like little hurdle. Like what Raju and others say that the humanity and humanism is the most purest form of stuff. You don't have to believe in religion at all. That's something that they would have done. But they touched up upon the issue of caste indirectly again. And yeah, directly they said converted and all. It is understandable and it's understood. But however, you should also look at Bharati's father's, also very small character, but it's very significant because Bharati's father character is irritated when the religious sermons were happening. He was not irritated with the caste presence. That's what I was actually little confused and was wondering. Was it really irritation about Christian sermons or the caste presence, the presence of Joseph beside his daughter Bharati? Because if you kind of see a little bit about history of Christianity in Andhra Pradesh, mostly Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, not much conversion happened because of British intervention and all. A lot of conversions happened in coastal Andhra. But most of the followers of Christianity are Dalits, and most of the leadership is either Brahmin, Kamma, or Reddy. The Archbishop of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana is a Reddy, Tumma Reddy. So that's also very interesting. I mean, I didn't want to kind of bring it, but I thought it's very interesting to see that I don't see a religion a recurring point. I mean, I don't see Bharati, though she's clearly, explicitly, she mentioned that Matam, religion, is a hurdle between us, but conveniently put the blanket on the caste. That's what I was thinking that Venkatesh Maha didn't want to take a risk, didn't want to talk about caste in a direct way. Like he is a president. That's not a problem. I'm not really saying that he should have talked about. He should have, like Palasa, there should be a fight and all. I'm actually not talking about it. I'm only saying that Care of Kancharapalem is so different. At the same time, it's so part of the tradition that of Telugu industry that follows. I hope there's so many questions actually. One probably can discuss a lot, but it's a kind of generic answer that I can give.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I want to just respond.
Since
As
it
an,
was also about, I think, Super Deluxe. Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
yes, yes. I think it's a good comparison. But they are also, there are these kind of convergences. Like Amaras Perez. There is, a point where the narratives intersect in this multimodal kind of narrative structure. But also they are vastly different because also I have to say that Super Deluxe was released later than this film, because Super Deluxe came in 2019. This came in 2018 actually. Super Deluxe, that it's made by one of what we all perceive as a prodigious talent, that extraordinary directors, Kumara Rajan Tyagaraja. But then his filmmaking style it has more to do with the visuality of what we perceive as contemporary extreme cinema, like Korean and Japanese cinema. But he has this kind of extraordinary way of looking at things. His signature kind of style of looking at. Though he has made only 2 films till now, he's rated very highly because of that. But on the other hand, the critique will be about that because of his over-the-top kind of style, he also goes for over-the-top kind of narratives. Like, see, for example, his portrayal of transgender became very problematic. All the transgenders gave statements, against the film, and also some of them supported, but it was kind of divided. And you can Google and see that, because his characters are also like that. Like if you look at the narrative, on the one hand, that even if Kancharapalam as stars, but mainly, that it is also about non-actors, that there may be a few stars, but there are mainly, we remember the film as these faces of people we saw, like say, in a film like Angamali Diaries, of contemporary kind of cinema. Of course, that was another level of working with non-actors, but whereas in Super Deluxe, every episode has a star, or somebody like Mishkin, with a well-known director, or Ramya Krishnan. She plays, like, for instance, a young mother, whose son watches her accidentally in a porn film. So this is the kind of subjects, which fascinates, Kumar Raja, that it's far removed than, the engagement with a certain kind of reality, on the floor here in this film. So his mise-en-scene, his approach to the narratives, even in, his earlier film, Aranya Gandam, it was like, modeled after a video game kind of a structure, which was quite new to Tamil cinema. He's definitely, an astute stylist, but that is like far removed from a certain engagement, at the intersection of our received notions regarding reality in cinema in this film.
Anyone else would like to add anything else to the discussion? Shrija, yes, please go ahead.
Hello. So I was thinking about the second point that Geeta ma'am had raised about the narrative of the father, of Sundaram's father. And I think perhaps it had that much of an emphasis in the story because it sets up like the foundation to how Raju approaches faith, perhaps. On one level, it's his relationship with the Ganesha idol. And I think it's also on another level how the father is treated, right? So the fact that he perhaps wants to transcend the caste or social boundaries. He wants to, be a businessman or get a contract of his own. But inevitably, he's dealt with the short end of the stick. So he's, I think there's a certain kind of disillusionment with their social standing. And even though throughout the film, Raju's character has a very personal relation with faith, he's also constantly having to deal with the social aspect. whether it's caste identity or whether it's about religion and conversion. I think it's both philosophical and social for him at both ends. And I think the first narrative with the father kind of lays the foundation for the second narrative.
Yeah. Thanks, Shrija. Your voice kind of trailed off. Is that all, or we have lost you?
I think that was it, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Yeah, that was a very interesting observation. That the point that the father wants to emerge as an entrepreneur, rise above his vocation in some ways, and that is problematic for everyone around. So that seems to be a source of threat for everyone around. Yeah, anyone else? Vamshi, Geeta, would you like to respond to this point?
Yeah, very interesting point. No, I really liked it. But when Srija was talking about the way his desire is like stumped, to become entrepreneur. I was just thinking, maybe Tarakeshwar point again going back. It is so real, That's what happens in society. The aspirations of all the characters are suppressed. So in that way, it's so real that that's what happens outside as well. Care of Kancharapalam becomes a microcosm of India, where people from different backgrounds come together and kind of want to go up in the ladder. Some people go in the beginning, and some people fall down. Some people go in the middle. Some people go and go and go, and Raju ends up at the end of the age, 50, before his retirement. He settles down in his life. I mean, so called, that's what, according to his own colony, he settles down in the life. In that way, it's so real.
Yeah, Geeta, go ahead. You had unmuted yourself.
No, yeah, I mean, like, possible what Srija said, I guess, is possible. But like I said, even when I raised this point, I mean, independently, it is a very poignant tale, no doubt about it. But I'm still wondering about its, relevance to the larger uh, plots or the larger narrative structure.
Okay.
I think uh, that is very important. The death of the parents, what impact it had on Raju. So in that sense, it is very important. And what led to that? And as everyone is saying, he was a laborer in the business of making gods, and he wants to be an entrepreneur in the business of making gods. So he is somebody who is creating gods or who is making gods, but he wants to move from being a laborer to an entrepreneur. That's a very good point. So that movement from what was the undercurrent, the community that he belongs to, and then he moves to being a Christian after the death of his father, is also very important. So he is creating gods, and the god doesn't support neither him nor his son. So losing faith in that god is an important aspect which links it to the uh, subsequent narrative.
Yeah. Anyone
I
else? Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm
Please.
looking at the four. I mean, those characters, Sundaram and Joseph and the Gaddam and Raju, in a literal sense, as one and the same. Like, it's not that when Raju was young, this happened to him, and then when he grew up, I'm not looking at it that way. I'm looking at it when he says that this happened to me when I was 10 years old, when I was 20 years old. I think it's more in the sense of symbolic. Like he's trying to say that this is, it's like every man, like this is what we have. I mean, like these are the possibilities that at each stage in life we could have gone through this, and then finally, I have succeeded in actually marrying the woman I love after these failures. So I'm not sure if it was intended to be his life story in a literal sense or in a symbolic.
Yeah, I think Tarakeshwar was also agreeing with you when he was saying that it was more symbolic rather than
metaphorical.
Yeah, metaphorical. Yeah. Sanjay, please go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Geeta. It's supposed to be more symbolic because when after the wedding, they go to their home. Then what happens that Raju is saying that, in every villager, I see my face. And it has been said in a jocular way that that's why he keeps on staring when he looks at a young man. So that means he sees his own reflection in the face of other people, young people of his village. So that is also there. So there is one ambiguity. It's not necessarily
one or the
yeah,
other.
it's in that sense that he is the one who has been played by different characters, but he can see his own reflection in different characters. So I mean, it has been told very beautifully that at different stages, because he says, when he's talking about Joseph, he says 23-year-old, then it is 33-year-old, and then he is himself 49-year-old, approaching 50. So these are the different stages of the life of a man. And it has been used symbolically, basically, not necessarily the same person, Sundaram, who becomes Joseph, and Joseph becomes Gadam, and Gadam becomes Raju. But I like that idea.
Yes, yes, yeah. Yeah, Rajan, please go ahead. Rajan, please go ahead.
Yeah. But I think at the end of the movie, this idea of marriage becomes the societal and all those kind of things. But you find that this man is still gynophobic, right? The whole marriage scene and the remarks that these guys have, all the innuendo about the starting of the generator and saying, well, you're not capable, right? So that still goes on. It doesn't have a resolution at all. And only the social side of him gets resolved, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. Yes. Yeah, yeah. The expense, I mean, the joke still continues. The joke's still on him.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else?
So, regarding the comparison with Angamali Dairies and Super Deluxe, more than these two movies, I think this should be compared with the old age love romance that is cropping up in almost all South Indian languages. So I think in the last 10 years, we have seen several such movies, whether Tamil or Kannada, so or even Malayalam. So I think there is some link between the old age people coming back as a protagonist in many of the movies, including Bollywood. So the age characters and the romance between them. So I think uh, this film also participates in that kind of trend that we see in the last 10 years. And interestingly, these old age films, old age romance, uh, it was the characters of belonging to upper class and upper caste to begin with. Slowly, what we are seeing in the last few years is there's a diversification of the old people too. So people belonging to different strata of society are coming into uh, uh, this kind of old age romance movies. So I think that needs to be studied together. That a trend, mm, and it has something to do with mm, the old age issue that is being uh, as, in India. Number one. Number two, also to do with uh, catering to the different sections of our society in terms of age too. So with uh, television, satellite market and multiplex, now with OTT, I think it also has its own audience. So in that sense, this film could be seen as part of this plethora of films on old people or old age romance uh, that is coming up in several languages simultaneously in the last decade or so. Uh,
Yeah.
Rather than comparing with super deluxe.
Yeah, offhand I can think of this Pudu Pudam Kale, is it? I think that anthology film on the Tamil anthology film on the pandemic, where one of
Yeah,
the stories is about.
And
it's an
also this Power
Pudukale.
Pandian.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah,
also KD.
there is
But
a
they're all not romances per se, right? They're about
He
old
goes looking for his
protagonists.
old age friend, his
Ah,
school
ah,
friend.
yeah.
yeah, there is a Malayalam film from 2011 called
Okay.
Pranayam.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's like Mohanlal and I think Jayapradha. Jayapradha plays the lead roles. So they are in their 60s or something, and it's a whole love triangle happening at that age. And Anupam Kher is the other man involved. It's a very interesting film.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to say something about what Vamshi
Ah,
mentioned in his introductory remarks about Paranjit. Paranjit and how he uses Rajnikant. So, so like Vamshi mentioned that this film doesn't seem preachy to him, but I felt it was quite preachy about religion and caste at certain moments. So the same thing happens in Paranjit's films, but it doesn't seem preachy in a way because of the use of Rajnikant. Precisely because of the use of Rajnikant, because Rajnikant as a mass hero, mass action hero. Uh, a mass action hero doesn't preach. A mass action hero will met out commands, will give commands, will give orders. So in that kind of figure, this preaching thing will become more and more subtle. Yeah.
okay. So that's an interesting observation. What happens when you have a star in a film like the ones that Paranjit makes? And Vamshi, can one imagine any of the stars, playing the kind of role in Telugu, that is there in Kancharapalam? I mean, will they act in Maha's films in the future? Anything like that that you're catching? Any new trends in the Telugu film industry?
Yeah, what happens if Maha does some movie with a star is that it would be a completely different movie altogether. See, this is the problem with Telugu film new directors. When they make the first film, that's their film. They've been thinking about it. They write the story, they put the life into it. The moment they are recognized, the stars just grab it. They grab them, and the directors get into the star system. So far, the directors who made a mark with their first movies, unlike even Kancharapalam, even with the small movies that are not so like Kancharapalam, uh, they tend to kind of make decent movies, but to accommodate the star somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
If not, then you end up being a filmmaker of this sort, where you will be known as kind of new wave filmmaker, and just keep making this kind of movies. That's it.
Yeah. Is that all? Any other points anyone wants to make? Okay. If that's all, we've had a long and very interesting discussion about this film tonight. Thank you, Vamshi, for suggesting the film and for the elaborate introduction, also for all the comments that you made in between. Thanks everyone for joining in. It's late evening, but I think we've all been very enthusiastic in talking about Kancharapalam. Thank you once again, and see you all next Saturday with yet another film discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
So good night.
And good night.
Yeah, good
Thank
night.
you. Good night.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Everyone.
Yeah,
Good night.
good night.